Welcome to the Inside Integration Podcast. My name is Chris. I'm joined, as always, by my friend here, Jason.
What's up, everybody?
And today's a little bit of a sad day here in the Oliver family. We learned over the weekend that our beloved friend and teammate John Bolin passed away, and John was John was an integral part of our team. He was our Sony brand ambassador, but he brought so much more to the table than just that. Again, this is a guy who's been in this industry for 50 years and friend to just about everybody. And just an absolute gut punch hearing that this morning.
Yeah, it was a crazy way to. We record on usually earlier in the week than when we release these things. So we're recording on a Monday, and to start off our day with the news that we had lost John was definitely not how I had didn't have it on my bingo card. It seems to be a recurring theme here lately with a lot of things going on in the world per se, but yeah, to hear that he was gone was definitely, as you appropriately put it, a gut punch. John's been a key member of this team with the transition when Oliver took over Sony in Northern California, um, and John was stayed with the team, kind of through the transition, but also because he'd been dealing with the Sony ship for about 10 years, and that was with the P, Sony ship,
Right.
all right, for 10 years. So, really a lot of experience and carried that over into this, kind of unfortunately what I would say is the last phase of his career. But, no less important, no less impactful. And, again, a lot to process first thing in the morning when you start your day.
Just and again, like the immediate thought is just all the dealers that John has
Oh
interfaced
my
with,
God.
helped out over his career. And that's kind of what makes this such a loss
Right.
is that the man literally touched so many different dealers and situations and everything. And I mean, you know I haven't worked with him too long. We didn't really work too closely together. Obviously, we were all part of the same team, and I love the guy, and he was just great to have a conversation with because, man, just the history that this man has seen and the things that he's seen over the evolution of this industry and how things have gone and what dealers are doing differently now than they have before. It's just a huge loss to not be able to have those conversations anymore. And it's this is going to be a bit of a somber show, so
Yeah,
strap
yeah.
in.
We'll try not to, try not to drag it down into the muck too bad. I think you and I can both absolutely testify that it's one of our biggest regrets that we didn't get him on this podcast. It was certainly something that we talked about having him on the show, just to hear some of those stories that you're referring to, right? To hear
Yeah,
some of the history and, for anybody in Northern California that's in the CI market, John was kind of an institution. Uh, Many brands that he shouldered over the years, URC for sure, definitely Sony, but they had their turn with a bunch of the big players over the years in that market, and John was there for all of it. Saw the transition from early technology, the analog days of TV as a fan, right, and then carried that on into the digital age and beyond. But some things that maybe some people don't know about John was the guy was an absolute historian when it comes to broadcast history, recording history, that kind of stuff. I mean, this may be a little inside baseball, but the guy literally has a television studio from circa, I don't know, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s gear mixed in there from all of that time in his basement, cart machines from his days as a radio DJ. Um, and if you never heard John talk, you wouldn't be surprised to hear that
no,
that
no,
that voice came through the airwaves in San Diego for years and years and years on a country western station. He was a DJ. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. It's hard to put into words the kind of impact all of those experiences would have on a person. And then the fact that they ended up in the custom install space as a sales rep to leverage all of that history and all of knowledge and know-how and all that stuff against to sort of contextualize everything that you sell or that you're dealing with dealers and customers, I think is really powerful and just not something that you can replace without putting in the time, putting in the work. So John definitely did all of that.
Certainly a unique figure in this world that we love. And again, just the history, just having a conversation with the guy and hearing about how, this is how things got started in the 90s. This is how, this is how this ball started rolling. And, you kind of, we all lived through a lot of it, but to have that perspective that John was able to bring, and to just hear, like the gravitas of his, in his voice, like the man was a legend in this.
Sure. Yeah,
And
there's no question.
and to not have that anymore is it's a loss for all of us. And
Definitely.
not an easy day. I think the first time I actually worked closely with John was actually a little over a year ago when Jason came on board. We were we were trying to come up with a big. We had hired Jason and Anthony. Jason, who has stuck with us. Anthony, who is dead to us now. Quite no. He's
I'm sure
still,
when he hears this, he's
yeah.
Gonna appreciate it. He's one of our avid listeners. So
Yeah, still a good
go ahead
friend.
and go ahead and mail that coal to Chris, Anthony. I will send you two gold bars to make amends for that.
But we were bringing Anthony and Jason on board, and it was great. Two big heavy hitters in the industry. Bringing them in as reps and making them part of this team to build the team and make it more. And I wanted to do something nice, and so essentially we cut a movie trailer for the two of them arriving. You may remember it, you may not remember it.
I do.
And the thing that made the video what it was getting John's voice to narrate it. And it was, I didn't really know him too well. I knew his voice from the calls. I knew, from talking to him, and I just essentially called him up and said, "Hey John, I got this weird idea. Here's what I'm looking to do. Here's some thoughts. Here's a rough cut. We need that, we need that movie announcer thing. And you seem to have that in spades. So, what can we do with this?" And he made a bunch of notes. We kind of came up with a real script together, and in the man's own recording studio in his home.
Idaho too.
Yes.
I love that. I love that little intro. So I don't know if we can tag that or we can add that to the bumper here or whatever, but it's
But
certainly a good one. Sorry, didn't mean to steal your thunder. That
nah,
just reminded me.
it's okay. But no, he, had no hesitation whatsoever. There was no like, this is stupid. Like I don't see the point of this.
Which is what he probably should have said, honestly.
Which
but
and in
fair.
fairness, it may have been what he was thinking, but he played along with it. He got into it. He was excited about it, and that made me excited about it. And we wanted to put it out, and it literally made the video. The guy absolutely came through and just was always down to do something fun, or do something a little bit different or whatever. Man was adaptable. And just, it was just such a great experience. And besides spending time with him at shows and that kind of thing, we were all, everybody chips in when we do a show, and John was no
Sure.
different. He's that guy, and he's working the room, and he's talking to every single dealer. I mean, I don't think there was anybody on earth that the man didn't know. And it was great. And that is, that is something that will be sorely missed, is that big bear hug that
Yeah, right. Just
that John provided, you know.
the wall of John. That's kind of not in a literal sense, right? But like more metaphorically, like there's just a lot of a lot of stuff going on. The guy's just been around forever. I think back about I was thinking about what we were going to say about him on this, and certainly there's a tons of stories. I think about the very first time that I met John was during kind of there was a transition phase where Sony decided to go out to independent reps, and we were meeting all the reps in the territory, and they had hired the rep agency was Novador Firestone at the time. They'd hired this rep firm to represent Sony in Northern California. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words here. But we walk into this meeting, and there's two guys that we're going to be meeting with. One of them is a gentleman by the name of Glenn O'Brien, good friend of mine, definitely another Bay Area legend in the rep business and the CI space. His brother Barry O'Brien owns Performance Audio Video on California Street in downtown San Francisco. So we'll just say they've got a little bit of pedigree when it comes to the channel. But I roll into this meeting and I kind of knew who Glenn was, but I didn't have any idea who John was. So Glenn and I sort of strike up this two Irishmen in a bar immediately having a conversation because that's kind of where we started with. It's like, oh, O'Brien, what part of the island are you from? He's like, oh, Savage, what kind of occupier are you? Sort of deal, right? Like just a real, down home, Irish cut cut battle.
Right, right.
And then John rolls in to the meeting, and he was just this big guy, big voice, kind of grumpy, kind of a little standoffish. But as we started to get into the meeting and go over the proposals and go over the product, what really started to shine through was John's deep understanding of everything that we were talking about already. And he wasn't coming at this from a standpoint of, I don't want to lift a finger to do anything here. He's like, what don't I know already, and what can I take and leverage that to bring out to our dealers? Uh, and they were successful. The two of them managing the Bay Area, similar to the space that we have now, were managed to take it and go gangbusters with Sony in the CI space. And I've worked a lot of shows with John, a lot of CEDIAs. I think there's actually a picture of John raising his hand, asking a question, which he was apt to do on occasion. I think like it's a CEDIA pre-training meeting or something like that, where I'm at the front of the room and he's raising his hand. Well, that silly photograph got a ton of mileage, we'll say, in social media and marketing and all of that stuff. So that's always a time that I'll remember working with John. Was certainly first meeting with him, but always seeing him at shows and him being just into it, right? Just part of the industry, loved it, breathed it, made it his own thing, made it part of his life, and was successful with it. So you will be missed, John, for sure.
The man was an encyclopedia. Like every week on these Sony calls, it is called backs to, hey, we ran this deal 8 months ago on this thing, and just how did you remember that we did that? And man, that's just who the guy was. He was lived it and breathed it and put everything he had into what he did. And
the encyclopedic knowledge of all things musical, television, radio related. I don't think you could fill up 20 hard drives with all the stuff that guy knew in nuance and in coarse fact. And then let's not talk about hearsay and rumor, right? Like there's just tons of stuff out there. So yeah, again, I've already said this, but John, rest well, our friend. You will be missed, sir.
You will be missed, John. So welcome back. So talking about John, and again, we're gonna miss the heck out of the guy. But it kind of brought up some questions and some different conversation topics between me and Jason as we were getting ready for this show and kind of processing things. And one thing that we felt it was maybe important to talk about that is a little bit unpleasant and a little bit uncomfortable is the idea of succession in this industry, in your business, in how this goes forward. Everybody knows an AV company or a CI company that there's like one guy who is the repository of knowledge, and that guy knows it's maybe it's a small team, maybe it's like 6 guys or something like that, and you've got this one guy who he knows where all the bodies are buried. He knows where all the skeletons are in the closets. He knows where things go and how to do things and how to train people up. So what happens if, God forbid, tragedy befalls that guy, or in a better situation, he moves on and goes to do something else? How are we preparing for this kind of eventuality? And I think it's something that needs to be a part of every business. And it's really, the way that this industry works is like, we can't grind to a halt, right? Like no matter what, we are all always trying to do an oil change on a car that's speeding down a highway, and to deal with, a stumbling block like that, or, somebody leaving or having to replace somebody or however it goes, it's something that you need to think about ahead of time. And that's kind of what we came up here with, the situation that we find ourselves in. And it really points a lot towards making sure that you're documenting every, you know, all of these things and all these things that you do, and sharing that knowledge, amongst your team, right? Like, I think everybody's had a situation where this guy left, and, maybe in his head or in his only spreadsheet was every single login for every single, client router
Yeah,
or,
and now it's hidden behind his his hexadecimal key encrypted password in his computer that you cannot figure out how to get into, and this FBI is telling you to get lost when you approach
right.
that.
There's really
What
no
do I do?
recourse there.
No.
But yeah, and I think it's worth the conversation of, at least think about it, right? Like, at least take a look at your business and think about, okay, God forbid, you need a plan of action. You need a plan of succession. In a happy case, it's not that you're losing somebody, it's that you're the principal and you're ready to move on to the next phase in your life, or you're ready to
Yeah.
take this amazing thing that you've built and hand it off to the people that, work for you, or sell
Your
it and
children,
cash out.
or you sell it, or yeah, there's so many different avenues, right? But yeah, not having a plan, or pretending that it's never going to be a problem isn't a plan. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Just because you're not here doesn't mean that it's not a problem for maybe the people that you're leaving behind, coworkers, customers, what have you, vendors, all of those things. We've had some situations here recently with uh, dealers in our market who have faced some loss. We've certainly had, you know, uh, there's a lot of change right now in the market, if you hadn't noticed, with people moving to different companies, going to different places, and then, maybe that knowledge doesn't necessarily uh, die with them, but it walks out the door.
Hmm.
So you're constantly like, oh, I need to ask him this question, but he's not obligated, or they're not obligated to help me, or all of those things. I think that's really where the foundational points of a lot of dialogue, a lot of communication, a shared resource page, whether that's a SharePoint site or a local
Hmm.
NAS drive or some file folder, Teams folder. I mean, God, if you put it in Teams, it's there forever. That's what I was told. So,
It's true.
so far it seems to be panning out that way. But I mean, there has to be a plan in place for not only the documentation, not only the the pluses and minuses of where what goes where, but like silly things like password for your email.
Right.
Make sure that somebody else has access to your email besides you. Make sure that um, whatever it is, any open items, like maybe you've got a folder for work orders, or however you're tracking Salesforce. Maybe you've got a work order that you're a system that you're using, like a work order that's just related to calls. Just some way to document, hey, there's all these balls up in the air. Which one's going to come down and hit me in the head first? And what's the situation when it does? You know, um, we don't want to put too fine a point on it, but I think that seems to be probably one of the biggest challenges that we're going to have. Not only letting our league of devoted followers know that we've lost a team member, but also, like, I don't know where we're at with these things. Did we say yes or no?
Right.
Like,
Hmm.
maybe this was something that was a hard, fast, absolutely not, can't help you. And then somebody sees it as an opportunity to, oh, well, I didn't ask this other guy this question. Maybe he's willing to help me out. And then all of a sudden you're in a goat rope because you've got two different things going on. All could have been avoided if you had some documentation, or a through line or something that you could point to.
Yeah, and it really is. It's very intricate, and there has to be the process that you need to put in place. It's not just a matter of like, okay, make sure that there's a physical copy of this, and make sure that there's this copy of this on a hard drive, and then there's a copy in the cloud. Like, that's all really good, but something that needs to be figured out, ahead of time before the fact, is it needs to be kind of built into your company culture and your standard operating procedure that, for example, that technicians on site are documenting things, right? Like, this is
100%.
this
Yeah.
is where the splice point is for this. This is where those landscape speakers, they go to a junction box 50 feet off of the back of the house and 20 feet from the property line, or whatever it is. Maybe that's a bad example, but that's the kind of thing that, a, it helps you service your client someday, right? Like, so now, I need to upgrade these speakers out here. I have no idea where the splice point is. What are you going to do? Like tone the wire out and have a guy ring it out
Yeah,
all over
you're
the yard? Like,
illustrating the beauty of D Tools and
right.
all these other workflow type software platforms. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your train of thought. It just
No, it's,
like this is one of those things. This is one of the examples that I point to. Like if you use these tools properly, it's gonna serve you well.
yeah, just call notes, that kind of thing, like making sure that your sales folks, when they're having conversations with people, that they're taking contemporaneous notes, so that, God forbid, I mean, I used to use the analogy all the time, and I still use it, like, God forbid I get hit by a bus tomorrow. Like, yeah, that's kind of a real thought, right? Like,
What's the number on that bus, Chris?
yeah, I mean, well, we're in Orange County, so there's no mass transit, so I'm not really
Ah,
gonna, but anyway, um, if I get killed by a white Tesla tomorrow, that's
oh
more
well, it's a
likely than
far higher
far more likely,
probability.
right? I don't walk anywhere, so the risk is low. But basically, if you're building that into your culture and you're building that into your standard operating procedure, Jason mentioned Teams. Like, yeah, Teams is great. Having Teams conversations, having stuff saved in there. Slack is another good one. Like, get into a communications platform that isn't just text message chains where this information lives, is searchable, that kind of thing. That the successful companies are doing this, right? Like, you're bringing stuff into a unified thing. It doesn't have to be expensive. A lot of the free plans, like, they do a lot of what you might need to do, but building that into your corporate culture is super important. Documentation, making sure that you're not, that your guy that's pulling a wire isn't the only guy who knows about, where this thing routes, and how, there's an access panel that's above the dining room, wherever, that's the kind of thing. And it just makes it so that you can, when that guy moves past being just pre-wires and moves into, an engineering department, or whatever he does, like, that knowledge stays there, right? So your service manager can now draw on that, and it doesn't have to be this guy trying to rack his brain trying to figure out where this thing was. It's like, no, we can pull up in the project file and see where all this stuff is. Here's the job notes. Here's the notes from, when the sales guy talked to him 6 years ago, when this thing was first in the concept phase, and that kind of thing. And that, I mean, that's the sort of thing, that's the level of service that we need to provide, right? Like, that makes us better than, not knocking these guys, but that makes us better than the Geek Squad. That makes us better
Right.
than, your buddy down the street who knows how to do technology. Like, that's part of being a professional in a trade, and doing it. And, if we can nail that stuff, man, it's it helps your service plan. It helps your institutional knowledge. It helps you sell upgrades. I mean, that's a killer thing, right? To be able to turn around and say, hey, we want to upgrade all of this stuff. We want to go from an 8 speaker system in your yard, Sonance Outdoor, to, we want to do a 24 speaker array. And we know that we can do that because of, we know where these wires go. We know what we've got. We can pull open specs and do whatever. And we don't have to spend an afternoon going through your house documenting everything that we
Right.
did 5 years
Yeah.
ago.
We don't have to spend the time
Right.
in post to try to fix it. We
Right.
can actually get it in the can at the first place. And obviously, that's going to start with a culture fit. That's going to start with leadership. That's going to start with, you know, deeper training and really making sure that everybody's got buy-in to that platform. And I don't know how we got into this tangent of you need to document everything, other than we want to make sure that your businesses will succeed beyond you or maybe some of the team members that you've got on it, right? Like it's just all of these changes and all this stuff kind of comes to mind. Like you've really got to you got to watch out for what's coming, and more so not just your business, not just your customers, but like the people that are actually on your team, the family members that rely on you, right? Like estate planning, all that stuff is so important and so serious. And a lot of people go, oh, I'm never going to die, it's going to
Right.
be great. Well, I hope that's true for you. I'm glad that I know a deity or whatever that looks like, but the reality here, and not to take too much of a, too much air out of the room. You really got to plan ahead and be realistic about what the eventualities are, and try to be as open-minded. And I know everybody's like, you got to focus on the now, you got to be present, you got to be, you know, involved and engaged, and you do. But I think certainly at this point in my life, seeing what we've seen going on around us in the industry and on personal relationships, what have you, um, you should be looking down the road as much as you can to make sure that you do have a plan in place, and you are, kind of, whether you outline it or something and just use it as mileposts. Like, do we have these things in place? Are we here? Are you having this conversation, even if it's ugly and weird?
Right.
You still got to do it. I mean, we're illustrating that here on this podcast, I think, today,
Yeah.
as far as weird conversations. But in the practical sense, it's really important for everyone involved. And these, this isn't just your employees and your customers. This is your wives and husbands and children and extended family beyond.
Yeah. It is, you need to, it is a difficult conversation, but it's one that's absolutely worth having just to make sure that things are going to roll smooth if you're not available. And that, yeah, again, that goes for family, it goes for business, and it's huge. Along the same lines, like you're, as a business owner or as an employee of a business that's doing things right, like you're figuring this stuff out as you go. A lot of times you're not, if when you find a way that works to do what you do in your market with your team, man, the first thing you should do, start writing that down, right? Like
Right.
let's look at this
I
process,
make that
right?
joke all that time. Write this down, Chris.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Like, hey, this works, like this. Hey, when we do a sales call, like we do this, we bring, we bring coffee for this person, or we do this, or we do that, and this is what's brought us success. That's the kind of thing, we lead with this line, or we don't talk about specs or anything at all. We build the experience. Like that's the kind of thing that it allows you to scale faster, right? Because if you've got this body of knowledge in physical or digital form that you can train somebody on, that's really going to help ensure your success and help you grow and help you move forward. And when the time comes for you to move on to whatever the next phase is, whether that's being on the beach or spending more time with your family or whatever, that is the takeaway. Like all of these
yep.
things that you build and you can document and you just put together, that's what you're building, right? Like that's
That,
where the value is. That's the kind of
That's
thing.
just about to say it.
Like,
That's how you assign value to this thing. Look at all of the information that I've got. Look at the customer logs that I've got. Look at all of the backlog of information that I've got. Everything is accessible. You are buying, if you're selling your business, you're buying techs that have skilled and have
yep,
experience with every one of these customers. Like there's your assigned value, right? Like, so yeah, crazy to think how many people are doing this, like seat of the pants, hair on fire, as you say, changing the car's oil as you're driving down the highway. That's a good one. I like that,
man,
actually.
I've used that. That's, I mean, I
Man,
wrote that one down. That is part of
that
my,
would
my
burn
book
that
here.
would burn your hands right off,
Right.
right? Like, and you'd
Exactly.
be so dirty and scratched up. Like, like how do you hang on? I
but
don't know.
but we don't have a choice. Like that's what you got
Oh,
to understand is like we're the way that project timelines and that kind of thing. Like
oh.
there's very little downtime
Oh,
for us.
I understand, my friend. I'm
You
fully
know,
aware of.
you want to implement a CRM, and man, you are doing that as you're rolling. You get everybody to start using Slack. Yep, you're still gonna have to do job sites and hit milestones and everything else. And
Yeah, Salesforce with your work orders, make sure you're putting all your job notes in there, and that lives in their giant database in the sky. And whether that's HubSpot or, again, what
whatever.
you pick the CRM du jour.
Yep.
But yeah, there's our personal message. We're nobody to preach. We are certainly not life advisors or anything like that. But based on some of the current circumstances that we've seen, I think, here over the last couple of weeks, change is inevitable. And unfortunately, one of those changes is there could be a time where maybe you're not here anymore, your business isn't here anymore, you want to move on to a different place. The easiest way to make sure that that's not a complete disaster for everybody involved, including you, is to make sure that you're covering your bases, you're communicating with your team,
Yep.
and most importantly, you're having an honest conversation with yourself, and you've got a plan for what happens for the day that you don't want to do this anymore, or you're not here anymore, whatever that looks like.
In simple terms, think about it ahead of time. right? Like
Right.
have these conversations, you know, figure it out. Maybe it's, you know, every 2 weeks or whatever when you meet with your leadership team, or even when you're, you know, by yourself, like trying to lay things out for the next month or two, like get
Yeah.
these questions out there.
I don't think it should be like a recurring theme. Like maybe you have that, you bring it up like every 6 months, maybe a year, because every month they're going to be like, are you going to leave? Or like, are you out of here? Like, what's going on? Are you dying? Like, what's
Depends on how
happening,
much you
bro?
have to do. And you know, for what it's worth, like you know, as a total jerk, that's how you build interest. You know, that's how you're, you know, you're like, it's a lot like what my kids do. Like, oh, I really hope that this thing doesn't get destroyed. It's like, are you thinking about destroying that thing? No, I wasn't. You know, and it just comes up so often. It's, you know, you're that's how you do it. That's how you
That'd be
build.
too bad if this giant Lego castle were to get stomped on. Well, are you going to stomp? No, I would never stomp on your
I would
Lego
never,
castle. But
you know, unless you weren't listening,
I mean,
then
if you left it on the floor in front of the TV, like I told you not to 100 times, if I happen to be walking by with my Crocs on and stomped on it, could happen. I
my
don't wear Crocs, but
my two kids, I mean, literally conversations like that all day. 8 years old, 4 years old. The 8 year old has figured out how to trigger the 4 year old. The 4 year old knows how to do it right back. It is literally every single day. There's like racketeering going on between the two. Like, whoa, it sure would be a shame if mom found out that you dropped that waffle on the floor and didn't clean. You know, like it's just constant.
whoa.
Never ends. Never ends.
Are they
And
running numbers on each other or like I mean, like
I
what's the
mean,
racket?
I'm teaching them. They're just not picking it up that fast. So
The
you know,
vigorish, like you got to get the kids in the neighborhood. Come on. We'll come up with three numbers. You don't know what those numbers are going to be. You
right,
just sell the numbers.
right.
$5. See what happens.
You just it's the you know, yeah, we run an illegal casino in my head.
Sorry,
This is, you
I
know,
just I was just about to say I just put your children in an illegal OTB situation
no, it's fine.
and
And I'll
made them part of the Jersey Mafia. It was a whole thing. It was happened just like that too. It
hey,
was crazy.
stereotypes got that way because there's a
Oh,
grain of truth in there. But you know, essentially what we're working on is, you know, that thing that you know, you pull the string and the thing goes around and it goes, the cow says, whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, we're running bets on that. It works out great. You know, the whole neighborhood, you know, all the other kids, they're betting on cow or rooster or whatever.
Oh,
You know,
everybody's got to go pig. Everybody knows you go pig. Come on.
hey, you know, your guess is as good as mine, right? It's like kids roulette. It's great.
I got 5 on the pig.
That's my succession plan: is teach my
Okay.
kids
How to gamble,
how to
and
racketeer, how to run
how to
numbers.
cut corners and get
Yeah,
angles. I like
exactly.
that.
That's how. That's
Got to
how.
look for the angles, boys. Got to look for the angles.
All right. Well, that was a cathartic episode, and thanks for
Yeah.
if you're still with us, thanks for sticking with us. And
Yeah, I
you know,
think it's important. You know, John had a lot of friends. I think we've got a lot of friends that are shared, and whether they were business acquaintances or professional ones, what have you. You know, just take a minute to savor a day. You know, put on a Hawaiian shirt. Have a what was? Oh yeah, he loved a Greyhound. So if you don't know what a Greyhound is, that's a little vodka grapefruit.
yep,
So
there you go.
you want to channel a little John Bolin on a Sunday afternoon when it's nice and you're sitting by the water listening to some music. I think that'd be a fitting tribute. So
Agreed. And
with that, I guess I don't know what else to say here.
not much other than John. We miss you already, buddy.
Yep. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.